Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good afternoon to everyone. We are delighted to have this IAIS Malaysia Forum. This time we are going to discuss on Rukun Negara, revisiting its role as pillars of national unity. We are indeed delighted to have two distinguished speakers. First of most, Prof. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, who is the President of International Movement for Just World Just, and followed by Dr. Madeline Berma. This time she will present Academy of Science Malaysia. We are indeed happy to have this on FB Live to discuss on this important subject on this Rukun Negara. The recent launching of the 50th anniversary celebration of the Rukun Negara Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin on 9 July was very timely. It commemorates an important milestone for the nation, the introduction of Rukun Negara as the national philosophy by the 4th and the Pertuan Agong, the late Sultan of Terengganu, during Merdeka Day in 1970. Introduced about a year after the 13 May 1969 racial riots, the philosophy embedded within the Rukun Negara embodies the nation's core principle and its ambitions of unity, peace, and harmony for all Malaysians. The primary goals of the Rukun Negara include enhancing unity among the people, safeguarding the spirit of democracy, establishing a just society, maintaining a liberal approach in addressing diversity, and creating a progressive and technologically advanced society. This forum is an attempt to revisit and re-examine the role of Rukun Negara, particularly its relevance in promoting unity in contemporary Malaysia. But before we start the forum, I pass the mic to Prof. Chandra and Dr. Madeline. We would like to have Prof. Kamali, the founder and CEO, to give a welcoming remarks. Prof, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, welcome everyone. Most of us are in fact from the institute, but those of you who are from outside, welcome most warmly, despite the challenges of coronavirus and the movement control and all that. It is a fiat that you made it up to this place. Yeah. In fact, this is the first time that we are having this in-person seminar as we are having today after months. The subject of national unity in harmony and the fact that Malaysia has formulated Rukun Negara for that purpose. It has served a good purpose. I think in Malaysia and Indonesia, and before that Pancasila, they brought together a number of principles. Of course, our respected speakers know more about this. For the purpose because of the highly pluralist nature of these societies, although Malaysia is more so than Indonesia perhaps. They have served a purpose, and I think that both countries have been reasonably successful in maintaining social harmony in the midst of, highly pluralist and diverse societies. And I think they have both gained recognition and credit for that. But it is a continuing challenge. It's not really a static fact one can take for granted, national unity and harmony. It's work in progress. And I think that countries all around us, we see in the Middle East and elsewhere in Asia, that it is not an easy task to achieve. There is so much conflict, and some of it is internal imbalances and disunity and kind of going over the board, people, fundamentalists and radicals and all And I think that one element, an important component of that is, of course, Islam in Malaysia and also in Indonesia. And Islam in uh, Rukun Negara and Panchasila, they are united. I think in that one can say that unity in national harmony, wahda in tawheed, in ukhuwa at the level of Muslim brotherhood, they all go in the same direction and they serve a national purpose. I was writing something recently, and I even mentioned the point that because peace and social harmony is so important, it is not really out of place to call this as one of the maqasid of Sharia. And because there is so much on unity, on fraternity, on social solidarity, that the fact that the ulama of the past, Al-Ghazali is said to have mentioned these five maqasid of religion, protection of life, and intellect, and property, and generation. These were his ijtihad, and ijtihad is never final. So we can add to those maqasid those that are most important for our times. And I think peace has become a precious commodity. It is being challenged from all directions. There is more conflict, one might say, among Muslim societies than any other segment of humanity. And it is really something that is very worrying, it's very challenging. The fact that Malaysia and Indonesia and maybe other countries, also Turkey, and they have managed to keep their countries purposeful, united, and harmonious. It is something that merits emulation by others, but it is also become a part of our religion. Our religion, in the sense that there are two levels of unity, of fraternity in Islam. One is ukhuwa Islamiyya, that we Muslim brotherhood, but the other is ukhuwa Insaniyya, that human fraternity, human fraternity. In the Quran, you find two types of addresses. To the mu'minun, ya ayyuhallazina amanu, then ya ayyuhan nas. And in one place, we created you from a male and a female, in order to the nations and tribes, so that you may know one another, and through that you become friends of one another. And then follows that the most noble of you are those who are righteous, most ethical and proper, and stand for the correct causes. Essentially, unity requires unity at the ethical level. As the verse ends at that point, that you may be different in your religions, but I think the ethical norms can be at the level of humanity. And I think there we can find many common values that we can speak of together and stand for them united. I think that with these introductory points, I pass on back to the chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Kamadi, for that. Marvelous introduction of the subject matter of what we are going to discuss. I think you try to link how Islam deal with this. I think that is very important when you mentioned that we have the Ukhuwatul Ihsan and Ukhuwatul Insan, and that will be something which is, I think, Rukun Negara shall take the role of this. For that notes, I think I would like to pass the mic to Prof. Chandra. Perhaps, Prof. Chandra, you can, you have been talking on many platforms, in Wacana, in seminars, in forum, as well as you have also written a lot on this subject, this Rukun Negara. Perhaps you should share how this Rukun Negara importance for the unity in Malaysia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Moderator, Dr. Azam, fellow panelists, Dr. Madeline, Berma. It's the only panelist, actually. Prof. Hashim Kamali, friends. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salam. And Salam Sujatra, peace be with you. I'd like to begin by thanking IAIS for this kind invitation. I'm glad that IAIS has taken this initiative to organize a forum on the Rukun Negara just before the launch of the Rukun Negara month, as it were, that will commemorate this year's Merdeka celebrations. Let me begin by focusing on the topic itself. Rukun Negara revisiting its role as a pillar of national unity. Rukun Negara is not just about national unity. We have to be very clear about this. Because if you look at the Rukun Negara, it has 5 aspirations. National unity is the first. But there are other aspirations. A democratic way of life, a just society, a liberal society, a progressive society. These are also part of the Rukun Negara. In other words, the Rukun Negara goes beyond national unity. It is actually a document about nation building. It's not just national unity, it's about nation building. That's what the Rukun Negara is about. It's a philosophy. And that was how it was proclaimed. A philosophy for the nation, proclaimed on the 31st of August, 1970, because the leaders at that time from different backgrounds felt there was a need for a binding philosophy. And hence they came up with the Rukun Negara, which was to some extent inspired by the Panchasila, Indonesia's Panchasila of 1945. But nonetheless, the Rukun Negara is a document by itself. It is its own identity. And we shall talk about it in a while. This is the first misconception, that Rukun Negara is about national unity. I think we have to understand this. It's broader. It's about nation building. There's yet another misconception about the Rukun Negara that has developed over the years. Whenever people talk about the Rukun Negara in Malaysia today, they refer to the 5 principles and they forget that there are 5 aspirations. There are 2 segments to the Rukun Negara. 5 principles and 5 aspirations. The aspirations are quite often set aside. People just talk about the principles. And even the recent attempt to relaunch the Rukun Negara, the emphasis is just on the principles. No mention of the aspirations. But if we are committed to the Rukun Negara, we have to remember it is 5 aspirations linked to 5 principles. In fact, if you look at the actual document, it says very clearly that in order to achieve these 5 aspirations, we would be guided by the 5 principles. The aspirations are the goals. And what are the goals? I think people are aware of this. Greater unity, democratic way of life, just society, a liberal approach to the nation's rich cultural traditions, and a progressive society guided by modern science and technology. These are the 5 aspirations. In order to achieve those aspirations, there are these 5 principles. And once you begin to see that, you'll understand why the Rukun Negara has been articulated this way, different from the Panchasila. Panchasila is just straightforward, it's just 5 principles. You know the word Pancha Sila in Sanskrit. Yeah? Pancha is 5, Sila is principles. But in our case, it is 5 aspirations to be guided by 5 principles. It has got greater depth, if you allow me to say this, than the Panchasila. Rukun Negara has got greater depth. There's a reason why it has been presented in this particular way. If you look at the discussions that preceded the birth of the Rukun Negara, this emerged quite clearly. You take, for instance, an aspiration like greater unity, the first aspiration. We want this notion of unity to be guided by certain principles. We're not talking of unity that is estranged from belief in God, which is why we have belief in God as the first principle. We are talking of unity guided by the Constitution, which is why it is there as the third principle. When we talk about yet another goal, for instance, a just society, anyone can have that aspiration, including people who deny God. You can believe in a just society and fight for a just society. But in the case of the Rukun Negara, it's explicit. Belief in God is a principle that guides the quest for a just society. Or for that matter, some of the other principles, rule of law in the quest for a just society. You can just confiscate property and say that this is in the interest of justice. But our just society has to be guided by the rule of law. So there are reasons why there is this juxtaposition between the principles and the aspirations. And these things were very well argued in the National Consultative Council, made up of 60 odd members from different walks of life, different communities, who have to formulate the Rukun Negara. There was, of course, a drafting committee, but the real debate took place in the National Consultative Council. And we had the benefit of not only political leaders in the National Consultative Council from all political parties except one major party, and that was the DAP, that was not in the National Consultative Council. Well, yeah, I don't think they were even invited, but the DAP was invited and turned down the invitation to be in the National Consultative Council. All the other parties were there, including PAS, the Islamic Party, which is an opposition party, and the PPP, SUPP, and all the other parties were there in the National Consultative Council. And it had some intellectual giants in it. People like the late Professor Syed Hussein Alatas was a very active member of the National Consultative Council. In fact, some of the goals and principles were his ideas. And so was Professor Unku Abdulaziz, also a member of the National Consultative Council. Very interesting ideas, including a debate between the two of them, who, as you know, were cousins, Alatas and Unku Aziz, about what a just society means. If I may just digress for half a second, Alatas argued a just society means redistribution of wealth. Unku Aziz argued it was redistribution of incomes. Of course, both are valid in different ways, but in the end, what was part of the Rukun Negara was redistribution of wealth, because wealth is much larger than just incomes. So there were some very interesting exchanges in the National Consultative Council. And it's a pity that we don't focus on any of these things. And what we have done is we have reduced the Rukun Negara to just 5 principles, forgetting the 5 aspirations and all this sort of wealth of ideas and knowledge that was part of the formulation of the Rukun Negara. It was the first attempt in this country after independence to establish a national philosophy. And unlike Vision 2020, which is basically one man articulating a vision, in February 1991, in the case of the Rukun Negara, it was a whole group of people who were part of the deliberations, and they came up with the Rukun Negara, which went through a few drafts and changes and all the rest of it. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, that we should not just reduce it to 5 principles. We have to understand the richness of the Rukun Negara. Principles, aspirations, why? The link between the two. We also have to understand that it is basically about building a nation, that it had gone through a riot, that it had gone through a very serious riot that shook the nation at its foundations. And this was an attempt at rebuilding the nation, the Rukun Negara. Now, in the first decade, friends, there was some attempt to give some meaning to the Rukun Negara along the lines it was formulated in the first decade. For instance, if you look at the second Malaysia plan, you'll find that there is a conscious attempt to link the second Malaysia plan to the Rukun Negara as the guideline for our development plan. Very important second Malaysia development plan. This is when Tun Razak was still alive. After his time, after Hussein On became the Prime Minister, there was a major crisis where Hussein On openly said that he would apply the Rukun Negara in order to resolve that crisis. And what was that crisis? That was the crisis over university places, the Merdeka University crisis, about places for students and the ethnic factor that came into play at that time, like the question of how many Malays and non-Malays and all the rest of it. And in the end, Tun Hussein On applied what he felt was the Rukun Negara's approach and came up with a 55%, 45% ratio for entry into public universities. And he linked that to the Rukun Negara. So there was a conscious attempt to think of the Rukun Negara at a concrete level. And this was articulated later, after Hussein On stepped down as Prime Minister, by Ghazali Shafi. At that time, Tan Sri Ghazali Shafi, later Tun Ghazali Shafi, who was a major proponent of the Rukun Negara. But then, as we entered the 80s, the Rukun Negara was sidelined. It was not given much emphasis at all. And we have to try to explain this. I've done it in a couple of things that I've written, but I'm going to mention this again so that we can share our thoughts on this. Why was it sidelined, the Rukun Negara? A national philosophy, mind you, which was so important but sidelined. Unlike Indonesia, which has held on to its Pancasila, in spite of all the changes that Indonesia has undergone over the decades. Different forms of government. In the case of Indonesia, it was much more drastic than what we have had to witness. Different leaders from different backgrounds, from parliamentary democracy to guided democracy to military rule, then quasi-military rule in the case of Indonesia, and then back to democracy. But in the case of Malaysia, we've had more or less the same political system, and yet we have not been able to adhere to the Rukun Negara, which I think is really a pity, that we have not treated our national philosophy with respect. We have not been able to give our national philosophy the pride of place that it deserves. What is the reason why it was sidelined? I'm being very candid here. One of the reasons is the prime ministership of Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. It's one of the reasons. Tun Mahathir Mohamad sidelined the Rukun Negara after he became prime minister. In 1981, the Rukun Negara was more or less set aside. This is why I'll notice that there are hardly any speeches from Dr. Mahathir linked to the Rukun Negara. There may be certain reasons, which I will not mention in public, why he sidelined the Rukun Negara. They're not reasons of ideology or philosophy. These are, I think, quite personal, why he sidelined the Rukun Negara. Because don't forget that Dr. Mahathir was a person who admired Tun Razak a great deal. Tun Razak was the one who brought him back into UMNO. And the Rukun Negara is in a sense associated with Tun Razak because he was the chairman of the National Consultative Council that formulated the Rukun Negara. So there were other reasons of a different time why it was sidelined, the Rukun Negara, which is very unfortunate. And the people around him, including people like Tun Musa Hitam and later Anwar Ibrahim, who was his deputy, they didn't pay any attention to the Rukun Negara either. They didn't give any significance to the Rukun Negara. And this brings me to some of the other deeper reasons why the Rukun Negara was set aside. One of the reasons, I think, in the 80s and 90s was because a very big segment of Malays were more interested in the idea of an Islamic state. That's one of the reasons. They felt that an Islamic state would not be able to accommodate this idea of the Rukun Negara. Because even if you look at the first principle, it's belief in God, it doesn't say believe in Allah. So this was an issue for many of them. And they decided to set aside the Rukun Negara. Indonesia did not have that problem to that extent, even though there were individuals who raised this issue. Because in the case of Indonesia, to the first principle is believe in the oneness of God, but not Allah as such. Deliberately a broader notion of the divine. This was the whole idea. Same thing in Malaysia, a broader notion of the divine, of the transcendent. But in Malaysia, there was this uneasiness. People felt that one should be campaigning for an Islamic state. And since some of them had become very influential, the idea of the Rukun Negara was set aside. And I would argue, even though I know this is something that I've said now and then, which has made me quite unpopular, that in Malaysia, I think there's less of an ability to deal with profound ideas. We can't deal with things that are profound. When you have to explain what unity is, you have to explain what a democratic way of life is, you have to link it with the principles and so on. This is something that is beyond a lot of Malaysians. We go for very simplistic approaches, superficial, simplistic, we are comfortable, but not things that have got greater depth. I think that's one of the reasons why the Rukun Negara was also set aside. And perhaps other reasons we don't know. But the end product of all this is the Rukun Negara became less and less important. After Tun Abdullah Badawi took over, he tried to revive the Rukun Negara to some extent. We know that from the seminars he tried to organize and so on, but the landscape had changed. It had changed quite dramatically over the decades. Other trends, other philosophies have become much more influential, and it was difficult to reintroduce the Rukun Negara, which is actually the challenge that we're facing even now, because things have changed very much over a period of time. And this may be one of the reasons why people just talk of the 5 principles, because you don't want to deal with the other issues which would raise questions about what a just society is, or what do you mean by a progressive society, and so on. So you just set aside those things and just talk about the 5 principles because you feel that you would be able to deal with them. Things have changed quite a bit. And the Rukun Negara was one of the victims. This brings me to the last part of my presentation. Friends, what we have to ask ourselves is, why do we want to bring back the Rukun Negara now, and how do we do it? Why do we want to bring back the Rukun Negara if things have changed so much? Well, partly because I think there is a need for a binding national philosophy. Things may have changed, but the need for a binding national philosophy that binds the different communities together, that need is still there. It is still there. And there's a vacuum. We don't have a binding national philosophy that'll bind people across the South China Sea, will bring people of Sabah and Sarawak together with people on the peninsula together, that will bring the different communities right across the seas together. I think we still need that. And you can't have a philosophy that is linked to one particular community. That's the truth. You can't say, we know that Islam is universal, make Islam the national philosophy and everyone would subscribe to it. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It has not worked that way in any society in the world. You need something which is identifiable with all the different communities and yet transcendent. Identifiable in the sense that different communities will feel comfortable with it, and yet it must be transcendent. If you want to have a national philosophy for a multi-religious society, there's no other way. There's no other way. Which is why belief in God is the first principle, because the belief in God is a belief that is shared by people of different religions in this country. And the other beliefs, that are part of the principles of the Rukun Negara, king and country, rule of law, constitution, good manners, that sort of thing. It binds people together. Likewise, goals like just society, democratic way of life, they bind people together. This is the reason why you still need a binding philosophy. You need that. Hence, the continuing need for something like the Rukun Negara. And some people will say, well, it's high time that we created something else. Rukun Negara was 50 years ago. My response to that is, try creating something else today. We are so divided, we are so polarized, that if to bring people together, to agree to a common set of principles and goals or aspirations would be impossible. Would be just impossible. This is something that we have. Of course, it has its shortcomings. I, for one, feel that the term integrity should be there in the Rukun Negara. It's not. Yeah, it is a very, very important principle. But again, if I may share this with you, since I had the good fortune of going through the deliberations on the Rukun Negara, there was a very strong attempt to bring in the term integrity. Clear articulation against corruption, which a lot of the people from the ruling coalition did not accept. They were against it. This was from someone who was in the opposition. He said, you must put this thing in, but they refused. You know what is the argument? People will think that we are corrupt. Yeah. So it was not put in. Yeah, it's true. Doesn't matter. So said, people will think that we are corrupt, So the word corruption was not put in, integrity was not put in. Or even a thing like living in harmony with the environment, that would have been very, very important, especially with what has been happening in the last few decades. But the environment is also not there. But it doesn't matter. My point is, you cannot have a complete holistic document that is perfect. It's impossible. We are human beings. There'll be shortcomings. There'll be things which should have been there, which are not there. you should accept this. In fact, I would argue that if you stretch some of those principles and values, you can bring in all these concerns. It's not difficult. It's possible to bring in those other concerns under just society or under democratic society, progressive society. You can bring in all those concerns. So let us live with what we have and build upon it. It is a good document. It is something which would have played a much bigger role if it had not been for all those developments that I talked about. I think we should have made an attempt. It's not too late. Let's try to make an attempt now. And in order to make this attempt, could I suggest that we do perhaps 3 things very quickly. Number 1 is get rid of all the misrepresentations and misconceptions about the Rukun Negara. It is not just about national unity, it is nation building. Let us also understand that the Rukun Negara has principles and aspirations. That's what I mean. Get rid of the misconceptions, focus on the Rukun Negara the way it should be focused upon. Number 1, a true understanding of it and an attempt to explain the principles and the aspirations in greater depth, which Madeline, Berma here will remember is what we try to do. Our group, a group that I'd set up 3 years ago in January of 2017 to look at the Rukun Negara, to revive the Rukun Negara. And one of the things we wanted to do was to give deeper meaning to the principles and the aspirations. And we did that. The document is available. You can visit the Yayasan Perpaduan website. It is there. It is based upon the 1970 explanations and clarifications of principles and aspirations, but it goes into greater detail as far as those principles and aspirations are concerned. I think we have to do that first, focus on the right things, move in the direction, and then I think what is important, very, very important, is to evaluate the Rukun Negara on the basis of what is happening. The Rukun Negara is of no use if it is not related. We make no attempt to link it with living realities, with the society as it is. How just a society have we become? How democratic are we today? What about one of the principles, the 5th principle of good behavior and morality? We don't need much evidence, do we? We just have to look at our parliamentary sitting and then we know what it means, right? How we have deviated from things which are so obvious, the lack of ethics and etiquette and all the rest of it. So I think it is important to evaluate, to look at the reality, to measure ideal and reality and see how we can improve ourselves. A document becomes a living document when it's applied to the real world. This has been one of the great criticisms, as some of you here would be aware, of the American Constitution and its Declaration of Independence, because it is so far removed, especially in the past, removed from realities in the United States of America. You would not need a Black Lives Matter movement if you had held on to your Constitution, if you had held on to your Declaration of Independence in the United States of America. So likewise in our country, I think if we can apply it, evaluate it, that would be very, very important. And this should be done by citizens. Citizens themselves should do these things. And that, I think, is the second very important challenge. And the last challenge is this act of linking it with social realities, looking at values and principles in relation to social reality. That should convince us of the importance of values in our lives, the importance of values in the life of any society. It is not ideology that counts in the end, it's values. The ability to live by certain values. Just like in the case of a human being. How do you judge character? How do you judge a person's behavior? The person's ability to live by certain values. The same thing with a nation. We must be able to live, practice these values and principles. They're not difficult. It's a long, long challenge. You know that you will never achieve the perfect world, perfect ideal society, but the endeavor, that effort should be there all the while. So I see these as things that we can do, a continuous effort, the last third point about evaluating realities against the principles and goals of the Rukun Negara. That is another very important approach. And of course, to get rid of misconceptions and misrepresentations and try to understand the Rukun Negara in greater depth. I hope with the sort of programs we have for the coming month, August, that we will be able to do something like this, which is more substantial. It's a little more intellectual. It has got greater depth. I'm not saying don't have your song and dance. That's what we did with the launch of the Rukun Negara thing the other day. That we are very good at, the song, dance, and all the rest of it. By all means, but try to bring in some substance into our national philosophy, a substance into issues of this sort. And this is where we have not done very well. We can do better, and we must strive to do better. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Chandra. I think it's a very enlightening points. I think Prof. Chandra has mentioned that what has been lacking in terms of the revisiting of Rukun Negara. In fact, during the 50th anniversary on 9th of July, the 5 aspirations were left behind, were not being discussed. I think when we were at school also, we were asked to read the 5 pillars, but sadly we are not asked to memorize or to read these 5 aspirations. And of course, Prof. Chandra has also shared with us the ups and downs of this Rukun Negara from the different period of prime ministers, the leaders of Malaysia. He mentioned about, of course, the late Tun Razak during his time, where this Rukun Negara was introduced, later by Tun Hussein Ont, and he mentioned also a few other leaders, including Tun Abdullah Badawi. But perhaps later on, perhaps Prof. Chandra would mention what did Najib talk about Rukun Negara, because he did not mention that, perhaps so. And he concluded, Prof. Chandra concluded with a very important, if I can say, points that we should take. The leaders, the society, because when we talk about Rukun Negara, he mentioned it's not only on national unity, it has to be how do we want to develop the nation. It's so-called the nation building. Of course, we need to explain the principles. Perhaps that will be the case, and also to evaluate Rukun Negara on the basis of what is happening. And I think maybe in the later, the round, perhaps there will be questions pertaining to this Rukun Negara. For the further discussion, we would like to also invite Dr. Madeline Berma to share her thought on this Rukun Negara. Perhaps you are free to discuss on this. Okay, Dr. Madeline.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank IAIS for inviting me to share this floor today to discuss this title called Rukun Negara, Revisiting its Role as Pillars of National Unity. I would like to bring you back to 2017 when Prof. Chandra just now mentioned. One day I received a call and he said, "This is Chandra." I said, "Which Chandra is this?" I have another friend by the name of Chandra, which is Chandra Sinte from Sabah, but it doesn't sound like Chandra, which is a lady. And he said, "I'm Chandra Muzaffar." And I said, "Oh, the Prof. Chandra Muzaffar," because I've always followed his works, you were with Aliran, USM, and all the works that you have done. And I said, "Yes, Prof, what can I do for you?" And he said, "Madeline, I'm trying to form this, a small group, trying to, think, let us think of something about Rukun Negara." And I said, "What? of all the things he asked me to help out is Rukun Negara. But he said, why don't we meet and I will let you know more about it. And I said, okay, since Professor Chandra Muzaffar invited me, I said, why not? I would love to sit with him and just listen to him. And that's when we formed the team. And then I was so excited. The next day, I had my class. I told my students, guess what? I am in this team doing something on Rukun Negara. And my students just look at me. Rukun Negara? Prof, he said, what do you want to do about Rukun Negara? Okay, never mind. For this class, can you just tell me, what do you know about Rukun Negara? 99.9999% of them told me is the one that is behind the text, behind the what do you call that? The exercise book. And I can't remember which exercise book. So can you imagine that generation? Because I come from a different generation. Now I realize which exercise book they refer to. The one with the calculation about. I said, now I know. She said, Doctor, what is it that you want to do about Rukun Negara? I said, do you know anything about Rukun Negara? Some of them can recite the usual thing. They know, they said, they remembered that when it was in primary school. But beyond that, they said nothing. And then I start asking myself, what is it that I know about Rukun Negara? Frankly speaking, I don't know anything about Rukun Negara because I'm not going to represent Sarawak or Sabah. But in Sarawak, we don't even know what is that Rukun Negara called. Because as much less, in Semenanjung, maybe you understood the context of how the Rukun Negara came into, like Prof. Chandra mentioned, that was immediately after the 13th May incident. I came to Semenanjung, Malaysia, when I was a student at UKM. I don't even know what is that 13th May. And I don't understand what is happening in Semenanjung. Just to tell you about detachment. This is about, Prof, you mentioned something about it being a national philosophy, about all the 5, I think you highlighted 4 or 5 factors why Rukun Negara had been sidelined. And one of them is actually, we in Sabah and Sarawak, frankly speaking, I think we really almost like, we totally do not know why is it there and how it came about. But later, of course, with Malaysia, and then we start, schools, because I come from that generation where we don't really know that much. Okay, so I came to UKM first. It is in English. I came from an English medium, went to UKM and start doing in Bahasa Malaysia. There goes my headache. So there's the Rukun Negara, there's the 13th May, and there's all the other things that come into place. Why I'm highlighting this is just to show to you, or rather to share with you, that as a nation, we are not as united as what we want to believe, although we tried very, very hard. And I think that is why when Prof. Chandra brought to me the idea, he said, why do we do something about this, Madeline? And I said, yes, Prof, let us do something about it. So today, I will share my thoughts on why I think there is a need for us to revisit the role of Rukun Negara. Prof. Chandra used a different perspective. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up from the last suggestion he made. What are the realities of Malaysia that we know now? So my background, I'm an economist. I teach economics, or rather development economics, and I've done work on poverty, inequality. So these are the kind of things that I want to share with you. Okay, that's only the first slide. Can you imagine? Okay, Rukun Negara, we will not go into that. I think, Prof, you went into the detail. This is in Malay, kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, and all these things. I think all of us knew this, but, okay, this one we will not go, but this is for the benefit of some of my students especially. They don't even know. They only know believe in God, kepercayaan kepada Tuhan. The details, they said, we're not really into it, Doctor. They said, tapi tahulah what is kepercayaan kepada Tuhan. But I remember when we were doing the preamble to the Rukun Negara, one of the challenge is that, I think Prof. Chandra did mention that when we wanted to bring this Rukun Negara back and the preamble and everything, one of the things that why people were, especially the Malay Muslims, they said that, why do you use the word believe in God? Why don't you use the word believe in Allah? So they said, these are the kind of things that we will not support. So that is another area. In fact, when I was in the National Unity Council, that is also another area that we had an issue with. Because while we were discussing this, one of the things that I remember telling you just now, the story, one of our project was to come up with something that unites, in terms of what are the common things that the different religion have in common. For example, neighborhood. So the Christians were something about neighborhood. The Muslims were something about neighborhood. The Buddhists and things like that. Okay, everybody was happy with that until some intelligent, those with profound ideas, he said, all the other religion you put in one book, in one chapter, in a separate book. Islam, you cannot mix it because Islam and the concept of neighbors or neighborhood in Islam is not the same. It is not of the same standards as all the other religion. So you cannot put them together in one document. And there goes our project. So there goes the neighborhood project. So, okay, never mind. So we are very smart. So we do away with a lot of things like that. But never mind, let's not go into that. But, okay, loyalty to king and country, kesetiaan kepada raja dan negara, there's a lot of things that's detailed that are inside what our Prof has rightly mentioned. And we have constitution, keluhuran perlembagaan, the sovereignty, and of course you talk about courtesy, kesopanan dan kesusilaan. But what Prof Chandra did mention just now, these are the things that we also, I put that under objectives, what he said, about achieving a greater unity among the people. That we seldom kind of really look into. We only memorized the first 5, but even that many of us did not memorize that also. I think if I ask the present generation, I don't think any of my nieces and nephews know anything about Rukun Negara. Okay? So maybe you can ask your children. So secondly is to maintain a democratic way of life, creating a just society, ensuring a liberal attitude. Ooh, the word liberal is really a no-no. I think this is really something that, you will be labeled, a liberal. So it is really, really, I think coming from SUHAKAM, I have my fair share of what a liberal is all about. So we are being defined, we have been, branded differently. And now recently we were considered as Rohingya, orang sayang orang Rohingya, because we are trying to, this issue about foreign workers and So suddenly now they say, oh, ini semua pencinta Rohingya, pencinta, so many pencinta now. So I'm having a big headache right now, but never mind. So the last one is to build a progressive society. And I think these are as Prof has rightly mentioned, these are all, most of the time, we have forgotten about it. Okay? Like for example, to achieve stronger unity, how we should uphold the spirit and to develop, one people, one nation. So that can sound very political. But, people say, even the istilah bangsa Malaysia was highly contested. They say, this is, one political party punya istilah, lim kit siang lah, macam-macam. So, I mean, it really, it's mind-boggling how Malaysian, Prof, I think when you say that Malaysians don't have this, they can't deal with profound ideas. But this one they are very good at. Bangsa Malaysia. How can we have Bangsa Malaysia? We have Bangsa Melayu, we have kesian. I always tell my student, if there is in Semenanjung, I always tell this very famous story. You have CIMB, right? China, India, Melayu, B is what? Bangladesh. Some people say Bumi Putra. I said, no, CIMB is actually Bangladesh. So now, suddenly, there is an accident happening at the highway. I said, the first thing you will see, when you see somebody, the first thing you will ask, bukan you tanya, the accident apa? Melayu ke? China ke? India ke? And I will always tell them, kesian orang Iban. If I were to have an accident, nobody asks, So that is how Malaysians, we are so ethnicized. We are so, I don't know how to tell that, but I'm sure many of you know that. So please, if you see me lying on the ground, please don't ask, you say CIMB, because I'm not one of those, okay? Because I'm not Chinese, I'm not Indian, I'm not, CIM, so Melayu, and then Bangladesh. So I'm not one of those. So let us do away with all this. No, even when we write, we always write like kepada kawan-kawan yang berbangsa Melayu, berbangsa ni. I mean, my students are really, fantastic at them. But I tell them it has to come slowly. Try to avoid, why are we so, I don't know. I don't know what is in our otak. So that part, really profound ideas. Other than that, not much. Okay, then to protect the democratic way of life, the guarantee of freedom, of basic rights of people. Now, this is really something. I mean, I've worked in SUHAKAM less than a year, but the kind of complaints that we have that comes our way, wow, I can only say wow, are things that is really beyond my imagination. We thought about just basic rights. I remember when we were discussing ICET, and we're talking now about LGBTs. So that's where SUHAKAM comes in again. Ini LGBTs ni. Ini orang SUHAKAM lah ni yang memperjuangkan LGBTs. We're talking about rights here, but never mind. Let's go to the third one, to develop a just society. When Prof, you're talking about the debate between the two, our our intellectuals, Unko Aziz and the cousin just now. Yeah? I had the rare opportunity of having attended both their classes, so I considered this as really an honor. Now, if you ask your students or anyone who comes in, who are your lecturers, who are your guru, they will describe you. Dia ada misai, perut dia bonjet, dia pakai cermin mata. They don't even know their names of their gurus. No. So they will tell you, I can't remember his name. That is the level of profound ideas. You try asking your students now. They don't, because now it's not, you're not expected to enter class, because now it is, in universities, all this MOOC learning. Your student can be in Hawaii having a good time, but you are handling this class on, they call it online classes. It is good, but to a certain extent, there's a lot of, I find that your students, you and your students are really detached nowadays, physically, emotionally, jangan cerita lah. So when you interview them, you ask them, who do you learn about? If I were to ask them about poverty or about economics, they cannot name their professors. They can only describe their professor. I think ada masa tu dia pregnant lah. And we were like, what? And you jangan tanya buku. Buku lagi dia tak tahu. Books. When I came for my interview, I was asked, name 5 books on poverty. Writers. So at that time, we have to memorize the titles. Now, they don't have to. They can't even memorize the PowerPoint. That's why it's called Power and Point. Okay? But never mind. They're getting more progressive. To develop a liberal attitude, that's number 4, towards the rich cultural traditions of our people. We have we have very rich cultural tradition, but look at what is happening now. We are trying to homogenize it. We want to make, even our dancers, you look at our tarian, especially when it is being conducted by government agencies, you have an Indian, a Chinese, a Malay, they try to dance and they try to make it look like as if it is a Malaysian dance. It cannot be a Malaysian dance. And then, I'm really against it, but never mind, let's move on. Kenapa dia move on? Oh, sorry. Okay, progressive society, science and technology, right? Now, pillars of unity or disunity. I will show you photos. I am a lecturer, so I used to show photos because I know I have to handle classes at 3 to 5 p.m. on a Friday. Nobody listens to you. I always tell them, this is a democratic country, so you can sleep as long as you don't snore. So please bear with me. So, okay, there are a lot of challenges that Malaysia is facing right now. So one is unity in uniformity versus unity in diversity. Okay. Number 2, one Malaysia. Oh my, that is during Datuk Sri Najib. So we heard the verdict today. So we owe one Malaysia to him versus Malaysia for Malaysians. These are all slogans, ideas, but nobody really talks about Rukun Negara as what Prof mentioned. We love all these slogans. I think Tun Mahathir is really, really good at that. I remember in the 80s, I used to follow all his slogan, pandang ke timur, pandang ke barat, all those things. I think more than 10, he is very much into it. Very much into marketing. And we talk about assimilation. So there is the argument, should we assimilate? Or, this kind of issues about, some people say, look at Indonesia. Yes, they have the Pancasila, but look at Indonesians. They have lost their identity. They are so, the Chinese are no longer Chinese, but they are still Indonesians. Cuma mungkin budaya, adat, and things like that. Okay. Then there is poverty and inequality, which I've done. And there was the RUU 355, religious fundamentalism, and of course, rising expectation. The young are not concerned about this anymore. When I talk to my students, what are the first thing that is of concern to them? Jobs. Number 2, also jobs. Number 3, I want to become a Grab driver. Because this is reality on the ground. But having said all this, we do have our moments of unity. I'm not saying that Malaysians are so, we are so disunited as much as we wanted to believe it. Prof. Samsul, Prof. Samsul Amri used this term, mamakanization, where he said we Malaysians congregate, or rather we lepak at kedai mama. So to him, there is a certain element of unity in Malaysia. If you want to use the mama kedai lah. But of course, even then with mama also, you find that the Malays will sit on one table. The Iban don't have friends, so she will sit alone like me. So I was trying to find friends, and then the Chinese will sit alone, the Indians. It's really terrible now, okay? But we do have our moments of unity, like for example, when we unite for MH370 during the Banjir, in Kelantan. This is the big Banjir. I was there because I brought my students there. So that's when you see the realities on the ground. It's really important for us to bring our students there, to see that then you realize that, in times of, things like this, you don't see people in terms of their religion. You don't see them in terms of their ethnicity. Banjir is Banjir. So that's why it's very, very important when we want to do things like this to bring our society together. We need to be united, but there must be something that will unite us. Or like now, COVID. This is in SUHAKAM we did like 5 or 6 virtual or webinar, and from there I realized that COVID really brings out the worst in many of us, and also it also brings out the best in many Malaysians. You see Malaysians, donations coming in. They never ask Melayu, Cina, India. But in normal circumstances, we only send our bantuan, our support only to a certain ethnic group. But this one, no. They will just come together, single mothers or whoever. So that is really something that we should really nurture, like what you say, Prof. The realities on the ground. These are the things that we need to highlight, rather than highlight the things that disunite us. Yes, this is the case in Sabah. When Gunung Kinabalu, there was a earthquake, and they were stranded up there. So we see about 6 or 7 of them that brought the children. These are children from Singapore, university, at a school from Singapore. They were stranded up there. And Malaysians were really like, we were united. We were praying and hoping that things will go right, Okay? Of course, sports. That's when Malaysians really, that's when Mama also become rich. Okay? We will stay there like 24 hours. Sports, it does unite us. So we continue. Let us support our sports team. It doesn't matter which, jangan hanya support, Manchester United lah, Liverpool lah. Kesian my university. I'm from Hull. Nobody knows where is Hull. So I'm the only one who supports Hull. But never mind. We need to support our team, yeah? Moments of unity. Now, there was a study that was being done. What are the things that bind us? So they conducted a study there. There's a 93% that say something in a Malaysian language other than your language. So 93% Malaysian can do that. I do hope that it's not about ethnic punya jokes, And the other one was, name 3 dishes. Wow, Malaysian fantastic at that. Anything to do with dishes? Awesome. Then suddenly they said, name 2 superstition other than from your own culture. So we start not to really know. And then 94%, name 2 festival. You see, where Malaysians are good. Festival, food. So the other one is, what is that? Never been to Sabah and Sarawak. I'm going to sumpit them. 39% only said they have, they said they have never been to Sabah and Sarawak, even though with AirAsia and anything. So I think we need to have more of this kind of surveys and things like that. Even like Hari Kebangsaan. Now, if you go to Sabah and Sarawak, I can speak only of Sarawak. You hardly see 31st of August. You hardly feel that it's Hari Kebangsaan. Sarawakians will ask you, who's Kebangsaan? So there you are scratching your head. And suddenly they said, why are you celebrating Hari Kebangsaan? Who's Kebangsaan? Ini orang Malaya punya, So this kind of feelings is really a reality. Now suddenly, Sarawak for Sarawakians, S for S, Sabah for Sabahan. So it gets, because you are not there during Hari Kebangsaan. If you are there, then you see the flags coming up. Then you see the S for S is everywhere, So we have T-shirts. I'm proud to be Sarawakian and blah, blah, blah. And of course, the politicians really, really, that's really a good thing for them, okay? And the only time that we have this kind of, you see, the thing about us is that we are very, we tend to, I use the word, we romanticize it. we tend to only have this kind of features only when during Hari Kebangsaan. And even like Hari Malaysia, look at us. Where do we put Hari Malaysia as compared to 31st August? Some of us don't even know there is such a thing called Hari Malaysia. And we just celebrated Hari Sarawak. Some people think that Sarawakians are trying to request for an independence now. So, that's another issue that we know. Okay, 28% have never been to Sabah and Sarawak. So I do hope that, never been to Sarawak. They've only been there only to what? 18% have never been to KL. Oh my God. Okay, I love Lat. We need to have more of Lat. Lat is the only, not to say the only, he is really the one who really brings us, we can laugh at ourselves. You know, although he used ethnic, dia ada cikgu dia yang gemuk tu, the one who used glasses, there she has, but Lat really unite us. You know, that even in SUHAKAM, we are now promoting the, human rights. We do have cartoonists. So we need to have more of this kind of reality, look at that, because Lat really towards the end, until now I love all his cartoon. Now, these are the channel. Now I'm going to show you realities on the ground, Prof. These things you may not see it because we hardly do it. And this happened recently, not really recently, about 2 to 3 years back, when they were trying the issue of who is a Dayak. What is a Dayak? Siapa itu Dayak? Dayak is a Dayak word. Bumi Putra is a Sanskrit word. And lion is alien, they translate. Because of the issue of, ticking the box. We are still considered as lion. But he was Tan Sri Adenan, the late chief minister. He said, why do you bother about those boxes? What you just do, he said, why don't you tick all of them? Don't let it bother you. You know who you are. He really gave the Sarawakians the confidence that we need. So he really came up with the idea. He said, we are Malaysians at the end of the day. But then we told him, there is no Malaysian. He said, you create it. You tulis bawah tu, Malaysian. Or if you want, put there Sarawakian. That is Tok Nan. You touch Dayak, you touch Wan Borneo. So these are things that happened during that Tok Nan's time. We call him Tok Nan. Now, this is an issue that came because of, this is quite recent. It's about job opportunities. So we had in fact, we were the one who was, we experienced it first before it happened here. It's only happening here during COVID. During our time, there was an attempt to bring, Bangladeshi workers to work in the plantation. So that's why this comes about. So no to Bangladesh, Pakistan, to kerja business kami, jangan rampas. So these are, you talk about being united, but it also, this brings out issue. Yes, you talk about unity, you talk about, now this is an old photo, but the issue is still the same, the conflict about resources. We talk about a just society, but of course, these are the Penans, these are the nomadic, they are semi-nomadic. The nomadic ones, you wouldn't see them, but these are the semi-nomadics. These are all against logging. We are talking about resources. Prof, you did mention why the need of having environment and integrity in a Rukun Negara. These are some of the issues. Sabah and Sarawak, this is really big, okay? There, Malay, Indian, Chinese, lain-lain. So we should have one Malaysian. And why do we need these boxes? I also don't know. We don't need to tick them, okay? Okay, now I'm sharing with you the latest data, which Department of Statistics have just released. And of course, the big hoo-ha was more of the why we changed the poverty line index. We were more concerned about that rather than the issue of whether poverty has increased or poverty has decreased. So we were more concerned about, why is government changing it? Or is it because the rapporteur from the United Nations was here? But what I'm trying to show to you here, this is published data, so I don't have worries about if you want to refer to it, you can visit our Department of Statistics. But okay, what it shows here, even after 50 years of Rukun Negara, look at our curve. Okay, we say we have improved in terms of our Gini coefficient, which means inequality has improved. Meaning to say, we have narrowed our gap. But what I worry is not the narrowing of gap between Chinese, Indian, Malay, because that one is not an issue anymore. No longer an inter-inequality. What we are concerned now is intra. Within the Malays, the top 20% Malays, The middle 40% Malays, and the bottom 40% Malays. The top 20% Chinese, the middle 40% Chinese, and the bottom. So that is really something that we are really concerned now. So you look at urban and rural. So Bumiputra, in the old days, we are very concerned about the Chinese, Indian, Malays. That is what we call horizontal inequality. But now, even after 50 years of our independence, after Rukun Negara, we're talking about a just society. So a just society is not just about ethnic, but it's also within the same ethnic group, okay? We talk about Gini coefficient. Yes, it has decreased. So this data is available. But as you dig deeper into it, it is more painful to realize that inequality is no longer just, across, but it's also going, vertical and horizontal. All right? Then we have ethnic groups and strata. Look at the income. You cannot have a perfect equality. Similarly, you don't have a perfect inequality. So meaning to say there will definitely be differences in terms of income. But these are issues. You look at the Bumiputra, this is really something that we never really kind of appreciated. Because suddenly the Dayaks, the Penans and everything, we were lumped together with the Malays. So somehow or another, we were, camouflaged by the fact that we were more concerned that there should be desegregated data. So if you have a desegregated data, the orang asli will definitely not be in that category. So, okay, so these are issues that are still, happening in our country even after 50 years of Rukun Negara. And I think now I know where the problem starts. It started in 1980s when we were all out to industrialize. We were so obsessed with industrialization. We were so obsessed of trying to shift away from being an agricultural, from a traditional society, the typical linear approach, from rural to urban, modern, from traditional to modern, from agriculture to industry. So in our obsession for the linear kind of approach of development. Okay? In Sarawak, look at that. We do have that. If you have not been there, please visit. They share a common gate. Yeah, they have a common gate, a mosque and a church in Miri, in Lutong. So please visit them. On Sunday, the churchgoers will use the mosque for, bukan use the mosque lah, the area and everything for things, or even for makan-makan and things. Similarly, on Friday, the church will say, you can use the mosque, our area, for things like that. But, the things like this are things that I always want to highlight that because this is happening in Sarawak. But I'm not saying that the little things, other things are not happening. And suddenly the word Allah belongs to the Muslims. Suddenly one day my mother asked me, my mother, and Iban, who all my life I have been baptized, I read my Bible, kitab Injil. All the words inside there is Allah Ta'ala Tek Pemaduk Berkuasa. Suddenly one day the court says, you cannot use the word Allah. So my mother asked me, so what are we going to use? Until now I don't know the answer. So tak apalah mak semayang je, whatever it is. But then apa? Because if you look at our kitab says Allah Ta'ala, which is Allah Ta'ala for you people, Tek Pemaduk Berkuasa, yang maha besar, maha. Our hymns, our songs, suddenly now we cannot use that, okay? But of course, I know what the reasons are and blah, 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 blah. But recently, about 2 weeks ago, I met an Arab Christian. So interestingly, so we were talking about this concept of Allah and all these things. He said, Madeline, you know that Allah is an Arabic word for God. It doesn't belong to the Muslim. I said, her name is Samara. Samara, I said, you better be careful. I said, you better not be heard saying this in Malaysia. He said, yeah, but Allah has 99 names. And she's a Christian. And I said, Samara, where do you learn that? She said, I read the Bible in Arabic. I read the Quran, it's in Arabic. So I said, oh my God. Then I said, but never mind. I said, I live in Malaysia. So, there's rule of law. So blah, blah, blah. But she said, Madeline, be assured, God is almighty. God knows what is happening here. So she said, just continue to believe in God as the first principle of Rukun Negara. Can you imagine suddenly one fine day, you will only understand the feeling until and when you become a minority. You become a minority, then you know how it is feel when suddenly there is a law that says, for example, you go to an X country where the majority are Christians or Hindus or Buddhists, and they tell you, you cannot pray your 5-time solat, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. So until and when you are in that situation, you cannot appreciate or rather comprehend the feelings that we as minorities feel in a country where the majorities decide how you should call your God, how you should define where I should go, how I should eat, what I should wear, and blah, 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 blah. But let's not go into that, just to show what the reality is on the ground. Oh, there's a bell going on. It must be from KDN. Okay? Sekolah. The use of Jawi, suddenly it became an issue. I studied Jawi when I was in St. Mary's Secondary School in Sarawak. It is a missionary school. It was never an issue. Although I did cheat a bit, because when it was written in Jawi, I would write it in Rumi, saying that, so when the teacher asked me to read in Jawi, I was very fluent. Actually, I cheated. I never realized the importance of it until when I went overseas. Then I realized that sebenarnya you are richer by knowing another language, by understanding a different, a character. Going to Japan, can you imagine going to Japan and not being able to understand that? Not being able to, you go to the trains in Europe, suddenly it's all in German and you don't understand what it is. So to me, what is the issue? It became an issue because it had been politicized. It was never an issue if it had not been politicized. So, and this one also I would like to show. This is, I think, quite recent. I don't even know where is this place. Penang, is it? Oh, Shah Alam. Oh my goodness. Actually, the writings, they were, but now I think they have already whitewashed it, I think. I don't know whether they're going to draw balik. Ditulis itu bangsat. And this is Dr. Siapa ni? Our DG. What has he done? And yang di Pertuan Agong, I think that, there was babi and things like that. What? So we are talking about a nation. We are talking about unity. I mean, now we're talking about graffiti. We're talking about things that my generation, I don't think we know how to go about doing this. How the Malaysian flags were turned upside down and everything like this. These are all the challenges that we have on the ground. That's why there is more reason why people like you, people like us here, we need to do something about it. So as Malaysia continues to exhibit great diversity, the need for understanding and accepting the differences among all people has never been more important. So, and this is where the Rukun Negara is really, as a Prof, you have rightly mentioned, we need to revisit why we need to understand it better rather than just having it as a text, the thing that was being written behind our exercise book, okay? So I would like to share with you the last slide. This is what do you call it? Our lat. I love lat. This is an Iban term. Segulai, sejalai, serakup, sepenemu. Segulai, sejalai, we Iban, we are very poetic. Segulai means together. We are together in our journey. Serakup, sepenemu. Serakup means we are united in our ideology. So with that, I thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Madeline. So the last phrase, segulai. I thought it's segulai the curry, segulai. where you share where we share the curry for everyone. Anyway, yeah. So thank you very much, Dr. Madeline, for sharing. I think you have also elaborated what Prof. Chandra has also discussed. I think you more focus on what is now the realities, what is happening. And I think you have shared with us all the examples. And being a Sarawakian, I think will be very important how to unite between the peninsula and the Borneo State, especially Sarawak and also Sabah. I think would be something you have shared a few slides. I mean, but because of the time constraint, you did not elaborate more on that. I think how this to justify all this in terms of the wealthy and also the poverty that every ethnic has experienced. I think we would like to thank on your presentation, and of course you mentioned also the challenges, the few challenges that you shared with us. we have, a little bit more of time, perhaps I would like to open to the floor. And also, if there are viewers on the FB, you can also have your comments, and perhaps I think we will take one or two comments from there for the Q&A. So for this session, I would like to open to the floor if you have any questions, but no more, presentations. Hope that there will be no more presentation. Any, the question or brief comments? Maybe I can start first. Prof. Chandra, I think, and Dr. Madeline, I don't know when was it, but you mentioned in 2017, there was a group trying to put these Rukun Negara projects to put it as a preamble in our Rukun Negara. And what would be your perspective on the perhaps Prof. Chandra and later on Dr. Madeline, whether we would like to put it back, that project, because taking to the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Rukun Negara, our constitution, we don't have any preamble. I did mention in so many other occasions, in fact, in our teachings of Islam, I think the Prophet Azam, when migrated to Medina, formed the society, they had what we call it the Constitution of Medina, and there was also a preamble. Whether there is a need to have Rukun Negara as preamble, that would be something that I think perhaps as a start, perhaps Dr. Prof. Chandra, you can share, and later on Dr. Madeline. Okay, Prof. Chandra.
Thank you, Dr. Azam. Yeah, it's true. We had this campaign of sorts in 2017 to include the Rukun Negara in the constitution, because the Panchasila is part of the Indonesian constitution. From the time the constitution was adopted in 1945, the Panchasila had been part of the constitution. But in our case, the constitution was 57, Rukun Negara was 1970, and there was no attempt to incorporate the Rukun Negara into the constitution. So we started this campaign, and we found that there was quite a bit of opposition to our idea from individuals who were associated with the Rukun Negara actually at one time, the earlier period, individuals who were not associated with the Rukun Negara, all sorts of different groups. And there was, I think, basically a fear about amending the constitution, bringing in the Rukun Negara. What will it do to, well, again, special position? What will it do to some of the other provisions of the constitution and so on? And in spite of all our attempts to explain to these skeptics, we said, look, it won't affect special position, it won't affect the status of Bahasa or the rulers and so on. The skepticism remained, and the campaign against our campaign was actually quite strong. So finally, what we decided to do was that we will adopt another route, not abandon the idea totally, but adopt another route to enhance the position of the Rukun Negara without requiring an amendment to the constitution. And what we proposed was a resolution in Parliament to adopt the Rukun Negara as the guiding compass for the nation. And to do that, we felt that we should get the support of the Conference of Rulers, the 9 rulers who constitute a body by itself. And we were fortunate that the rulers supported this idea. They adopted a resolution, the rulers, on the 10th of October, 2017. That was the date, 10th of October, where they urged Malaysian administrators, political leaders, the people, to view the Rukun Negara as the guiding compass for the nation. They wanted the people to see the Rukun Negara as a guiding compass, which we thought was very positive. And we welcomed it, and after that tried to make that the whole basis. When the new government came to power in May of 2018, we wrote to all members of parliament actually, asking them to support this, support the rulers basically, the Conference of Rulers. Out of the 222 members of parliament, only 4 bothered to reply. Out of 222. And the 4, they supported the idea, just 4 of them. And I still remember there was 1 person from the Pakatan Harapan, 2 from Barisan Nasional, and 1 person from PAS who supported the idea. We didn't go very far with the thing, but we had the support of the Conference of Rulers. And we had revived that idea again, and I don't mind sharing this with you. You know, when this new government took over, I raised this thing with someone who was part of the Prime Minister's office, and he was very supportive. And he said that he will raise it with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister's response was immediate, very positive. This thing about supporting the Rukun Negara. So the 5 pillars idea actually came out of that meeting, and he said that he would support the thing, but unfortunately he adopted the bureaucratic approach, which is 5 principles, not talking of the 5 aspirations. But we are still talking to people in his office, and I think eventually they will bring in the aspirations. But the present Prime Minister has been very positive towards the Rukun Negara, actually. He's been very positive. He sees it as something which is worth pursuing. So that's the story behind it.
Any questions from the floor? Please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am not a Malaysian, I am Bangladeshi. I spent 10 years in Malaysia. So I have some readings on the Rukun Negara and Malaysian history. I would like to give you information. In the last year, I gave a lecture in Malaysian Defense College. I was invited there to talk on religion and Islam in the international relation. During that time, I focused some important points, very dignified issues related to Islam, which improved, adopted in the Muslim countries. Then I found in Malaysia a progressive society as well as a religious society. Malaysia introduced on things very progressive, which is not only relevant and important to the context of national aspect, it also very much important to the world affairs. There were some representatives from out of Malaysia, 7 countries, including USA. So I have an impression the Rukun Negara, Prof. Chandra already mentioned, it goes behind the national interest. I think it has a very more importance for the whole world, whole humanity, because it was adopted, Prof. Chandra mentioned, 2 of the giant Muslim scholars from who born in Malaysia, but I know both of them, Sayyid Hussain Al-Attas and Tunku Aziz. Tunku Aziz visited Bangladesh 1978. He's a very prominent scholar. I regard them as a world scholar, not only Malaysian local scholar. So today I have found the Rukun Negara was adopted, designed by the contribution of two giant Muslims, progressive scholar. So I would like to draw both of your attention. Could you please think how we can explore the essence, substance of Rukun Negara's importance to the world context? My personal approach, my belief, if I want to give you an impression from our current experience in the India, India is a very progressive democratic country. But what is happening in India at the moment with minorities, particularly with Muslims? Have you studied? Have you looked at? Everybody knows that India is a very progressive, advanced democratic country. It is so even if you go to the Western world, what is the actually fact regarding the minorities, Muslims and others? We know the Western world is very progressive, liberal, advanced society. But how are the behaves of there with others? So to the context, I have another issue. Last 10 years, I did PhD from here. I was here as a research fellow. I worked on the contemporary Islamic history of Malaysia. And I worked on another issue, Islamic civilization renewal in Southeast Asia, case study on Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. Prof mentioned rightly about the importance of Panchashila. During my presentation, I also mentioned other two principles from the Indian Panchashila and MIM, another very progressive. This is a Malay Islamic monarchy from Brunei. I spent one and a half months in Brunei. I spent many days in Brunei library. That time I saw a book on the subject. I did not read any good article on the subject. I have to revisit, but I can say you, the Malay Islamic monarchy is a good principle, not only for Muslim, but also for any progressive society. Malay Islamic monarchy, MIM, also deserve a good evaluation and review, like a scholar like Madeline, a non-Muslim scholar. You have to think how the non-Muslim scholar can evaluate such kind of progressive approach. So, Rukun Negara, MIM, Panchashila. It is time, Prof. Hashim Kamali mentioned a word very relevant to me, the humanity. We have to work humanity. I lead one center, Muslim World Research Center. One of the principles is to promote universal ummah, not only Muslim ummah. We said if we want to focus the excellence of Islam, excellence of Islamic civilization, Islamic worldview, at a time we have to emphasize on the universal ummah. Because Islam always respect, very careful about the non-Muslim and other members of the ummah. So it is our very honest, humble duty to respect, to care the rights, the stature, the needs of other ummah. So I would like to thank all of you, particularly the Malaysian nation, that you have established such kind of progressive principle from the Malaysian land. It is not only important for the regional perspective, national perspective, I can say it has a very excellent importance for whole humanity. We should give more emphasis to explore its global importance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to respond, Dr. Madeline?
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting sharing about your study about going to Melayu Islam Beraja in Brunei, and then the Pancasila, and of course the Rukun Negara. And now I'm always I work in UKM, which is a University Kebangsaan Malaysia. It's called University Kebangsaan, mean the national university, but there's nothing national about it. It's almost 99.99999% Malays, and I'm probably the only Iban there. And yet it's called a national university. So that's number one. Number two, there's so many things. Having said that, I have lots and lots and lots and wonderful Muslim friends, Malay friends, Muslims, and non-Malays. And I've learned, the one thing that I've learned is to differentiate between Islam, that is being taught, what you mentioned, and my Malay friends. Because I know there are times, I know that maybe, that's why when I met Dr. Azam tadi, I saw a lot of articles being written. I said, don't give me other gifts, just give me the articles, because to me, that is what is being written, the occasional papers. Now that is something really good for me. Because the thing about us here is that there is a tendency to think that Islam and Malay are the same thing. Do you know that I cannot be? I just shared with him just now. Somebody just immediately after COVID, I met a friend, a very good friend. I'm sure she's Malay Muslim. Suddenly she gave salam to me because we met after so many years. She said, Assalamualaikum, Madeline. And I just kept quiet because I learned that you're not supposed to answer salam. A non-Muslim cannot answer. That was being told to me, okay? So I just kept quiet. And suddenly she said, you know what, Madeline? Actually, I cannot say salam to you. And I said, okay, that's, there's nothing much I can do. I was hungry, so I said, man, okay, bye. My colleague, she was my colleague. And I went on to go and have my makan. Just as I was about to go out, and then she stopped me again. He said, Madeline. And I turned around, yes, Prof, because I call her Prof. You know what? Dia kata, actually, I berdosa tau. Dosa means, she sinned because she gave salam to me. And I just do not know how to respond. So I just went up to her. Okay, Prof. I said, why don't you just do this? Because the only thing that I know is, since you already seen, maybe afterward, because that one was the breakfast time, and the only prayer that I know, and because my friends always tell me after Maghrib. So I said, today, Prof, during your Maghrib prayer, you go and I'm sure, you ask forgiveness from God. I am sure God will forgive you for saying salam to me. And she just stood there. She is perplexed. I am equally, and I don't even know what to say. So now, that is when I learned how to differentiate between Malays, Muslims, and practicing and non-practicing. But these are the kind of things I used to have. First, I have been denied of akikah and korban. Akikah and korban. So I was invited, happily, anything to do with makan, I will go. So, and then suddenly they give me a call. Madeline, by the way, sorry, actually I cannot invite you because this is akikah. So you non-Muslim, we cannot eat, but we will buy you food, no problem. We will buy for you. And I said, no problem, I will bring my own McDonald's. So I brought my own McDonald's, and I do have my separate food. But the thing that I love about it is that the fact that they respected me, they invited me. So I don't have any ill feelings. The fact that they invited me to their place. But it went on like 3 times. The first time it started in the 80s, then in the 1990s, and I had it recently. And then just about recently, a friend invited me. And this is where I learned about Islam. Then this friend invited me. I'm just sharing you the difference, how I look at Islam and Muslim. So she invited me. She said, Madeline, we're going to do akikah. Akikah means for children, is it? I'm saying, okay, you come. It is at this hour, please come over. So I have to remind her because I need to know whether I'm going to bring my McDonald's or not. So I said, Kakak, I call her Kakak lah, Kak Faridah. Okay, Kak Faridah, don't forget, I am Madeline Berma. And she said, so what is your problem? I said, I am a Christian. So what is your problem? She said, you don't want to come to my place? I said, no. You must not forget. I am not supposed to eat the meat of, She said, I said, is that so? But she wasn't very sure. But never mind, she said, I will go and check with the ustads. So I just waited because I got my McDonald's ready or Kentucky Fried Chicken. No problem. The fact that people invited, I'm happy already. So then she called me back. She said, Madeline, this is the answer from the ustads. I said, what's the answer? Can I or cannot I? She said, this is the answer. You imagine, this is what the ustad said, during the time of Nabi Muhammad. So Nabi Muhammad, the prophet, was slaughtering akikah and Madeline walking by. Madeline walking by. Do you think Nabi Muhammad say, please don't give to Madeline because she is a non-Muslim, because she is a kafir? Do you think he will say that? I said, Nabi Muhammad will not say that, but I think my Malay friends will. She doesn't know what to answer. But at the end, I went to her house. I brought my McDonald's, but she said, no, you eat here. But what I'm trying to say is that this is how, as a lecturer, this is how I answer my student. There are realities on the ground. These are the things. I have nothing against Islam. I've been in UKM for more than 30 years. I've learned about the quality of work. I've seen people who work because of the need. You know, they said in Islam, you must earn the money that you earn. I have friends who did not terima gaji, naik gaji for 3 years because he felt that he has not contributed. And I really respect him. And he's a Muslim. So he told me, Madeline, I'm not going to take this gaji, what do you call that? Kenaikan gaji tu. Annual increment. So he didn't take for 3 years. But the 4th year, everybody said, Ustaz ni mesti tak ambil juga this year. No, this year I will take because I have done what I am expected to do. That is the kind of people that, so that's why I said I have nothing against Islam. I have nothing against Malay Muslim. But there are little incidences like that one just now lah, that she cannot say Assalamualaikum to me. So I don't know what to say. So, but I know that, I mean, I don't have any grudge. I don't have anything because I think I know the difference between the two. So that's basically my response. A very long one.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, Prof. Prof. Kamali? Yes.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
I hope it's about my McDonald's.
That I have not seen anything in Islamic sources, and I'm fairly familiar that these things that saying salam to non-Muslims or inviting them or not invite, these things are part of the customary mindset of people. And I think literally assalamu alaikum means peace be on you. Peace be on you is something that it has acquired a religious kind of, connotation, but there is nothing literally or in the sources of religion that we cannot make friends with non-Muslims. In fact, in the Quran, there is explicitly that people who are not non-Muslims, who are not aggressive towards you and not expel you from your homes and not violent to you, that you be good to them and you be just and fair to them. I think from that you can infer that all other details that goes along with being good and friendly and fair, that these will be allowed in Islam. And I think these are aspects of that. There was a lot of interaction among Muslims and non-Muslims in early Islam. In fact, the Prophet Islam emerged in Mecca, which was a non-Muslim majority environment, and then afterwards, the last 10 years, he moved to Medina. There were a lot of Jews and Christians, and the Prophet, on one occasion, a Christian delegation came from Najran, and the Prophet was in the mosque, and he received them in the mosque, and then they wanted to pray in the mosque, and the Prophet said, allow them to pray in the mosque. And there were other instances of that kind, that you understand a mentality and attitude of recognition and tolerance. In the Quran also there is lakum dinukum waliyadin, to you your religion, to me my religion. In fact, among the great religion, maybe Islam is one great religion that is cognizant of the plurality of religions, of other great religions. And it's very clear in the Quran. There is this, and there is this attitude, whether it is racist, whether it is Malay, or whether it is Muslim, they are all mixed up in the name of Islam, and I think they are inaccurate. They are inaccurate. One ought to really differentiate and try to rectify. It is high time that we don't really mix up all these things and call it Islam. It's not really. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kamali. for the additional points of the discussion. I think we are about to end our forum today, and before we close our discussion today, I would like to call upon Prof. Kamali to give a token, to give away a token appreciation to both the speakers. First, to Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. Prof. Chandra. Prof. Chandra. It's all right. It's all right.
That's so kind of you.
Okay, okay. Okay, guys. Okay, okay. Thank you. And then also to Dr. Madeline. Okay.
Thank you so much for your explanation, bro.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's really, I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you so much.
You expressed yourself. It's very special.
I'm Iban. So we don't mince our words. There is actually, I want a photo with a scholar here.
Thank you so
Sekali.
much. And I hope this will not be the last time you come here.
Thank you.
We really enjoyed your presence.
Thank you so much.
And how you make us understand better Malaysia.
In fact, I even requested, I asked Azam, can I have all the occasional papers? Because as I said, I want to learn to differentiate between, the one that you mentioned, Islam. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is more important than giving my biased opinion about things.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Kamali. Just before we end our discussion today, just to make a few announcements. On the 11th or 12th of August, IAIS Malaysia will be organizing a webinar research camp. For those who are interested, just please visit our website. We have early birds rates and also students rates. I think it's a very, quite a moderate rate fees that we impose. Will be a good coverage on research from the perspective of Islam, as well as some importance of sharing moments with scholars like Prof. Kamali with regard to the research in the subject matter. On the 27th of August, we will co-organize with Legacy of Tun Abdullah Badawi on the Forum of Kemerdekaan in conjunction of our Hari Kebangsaan, the National Day on the 31st. Of course, I think it will have diverse speakers. We will be having local scholars. We will also be having representative from Indonesia, and also through online from Brunei, Thailand, and Singapore on this important forum on Merdeka in conjunction of our National Day. We would like everyone to join us physically and also online. It will take place somewhere else, but perhaps the COVID-19 will not prohibit us from having the physical assembly. With that, I would like to thank again Prof. Chandra Muzaffar and Dr. Madeline for sharing your time here. And I think we all have listened the presentations. I think that would be something that we can go back to the substance of Rukun Negara. With that, I would like to thank everyone. Assalamualaikum. Until next, inshallah, we'll meet again. Thank you.